Everything you wanted to know about frozen Russian assets, but you were too afraid to ask. Welcome to Brussels, My Love, the podcast with me, Maeve McMahon. For this special episode, I'm thrilled to be joined here in our studio by Euronews EU politics reporter, Jorge Liboreiro. Welcome, Jorge.
Hello, Maeve.
How are you? How's your week?
Oof, intense. Let's see how it ends.
Well, I'm sorry for dragging you away from filing your next story ahead of this EU summit in Brussels, though, but we need you. We need some context here because, you know, the EU wants to stay relevant in the talks for peace in Ukraine. They need to put their money where their mouth is. They need to finalise this deal on the frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. It's obviously the big topic of the summit. It's what everyone's talking about, but it's not 100% sure if they'll manage to clinch that deal. So that's why let's just go back to basics here, Jorge. Is that okay?
Yes, let's do that. I think it's needed.
Okay. So I've got 10 questions for you and we have 10 minutes. What are frozen Russian assets?
Well, these are the assets of the Russian central bank, basically. So where are the assets that the Russian central bank had inside the EU in different places before the war started? And these assets were immobilized as part of the first sanctions that were imposed. Basically, the Russian central bank cannot move them, cannot access these funds, cannot do anything with them.
And whose money is this exactly?
It's indeed from the Russian central bank. These were initially bonds, securities, this type of instruments that banks have and trade. And now these bonds, because they were there immobilized, have matured into cash, which means these assets are now liquid.
And where are they right now? Where is this money now?
We've
obviously been talking about Euroclear a lot, but it's not just Belgium.
Let's do the figures. We have 210 billion of Russian sovereign assets inside the European Union. Of these, 185 billion, which means the majority of the assets, are in Euroclear, which is a depository here in Brussels. The rest, 25 billion, is spread across private banks, which has not been identified. We don't know which banks are holding these assets, which is a big mystery. But the bulk of the assets, it's here in Brussels at Euroclear.
And remind us again, you alluded to it already, but remind us again why it was frozen.
Well, it's important to remember that in the first weeks of the war, the European Union imposed back-to-back sanctions. Now we remember package after package after package. The idea was to quickly deprive Russia of the money they need to fund the war on Ukraine, which is a very expensive and resource-intensive effort, as we still see today. So obviously, they found this massive amount of money inside the European Union and in other G7 countries, and they said, okay, this is a quick way to at least prevent Russia from withdrawing these funds that then could be used for the war. So G7 countries have had these assets fully mobilized, firmly mobilized since the beginning of the war, and nothing has been released yet. So the Kremlin has not accessed these funds. This is very important to highlight.
And of course, Ukraine needs that money. It faces a shortfall of 72 billion for the next fiscal year. How could this money help Ukraine and address these issues?
Indeed, Ukraine faces an acute shortage of foreign assistance after the United States basically withdrew all the funds that the previous administration was allocating. So now the European Union wants to contribute to at least 90 billion for 2026 and 2027, the next 2 years. So this is a lot of money. And the reparations loan is one of the options. So basically using this cash that I told you about from the assets, which now is liquid, and turn it into a reparations loan for Ukraine. So basically gradually send the money to Ukraine, and Ukraine at the end of this process will repay the money, but only if Moscow agrees to pay war reparations. So then Moscow will recover the money after paying the reparations. It's like a full circle of
So this, of course, is
money.
Plan A on the table for the EU.
Yes, this is the reparations loan.
And we've heard that EU Council President Costa, he's been telling leaders privately that they won't be able to leave the summit this week taking place here in Brussels unless there is a deal on this Plan A, Jorge. What are the chances, though, they'll reach that deal?
Indeed, there needs to be a deal on how to find this 90 billion that the European Union wants to contribute for Ukraine. So, as you said, reparations loan is Plan A because the money is there, from the cash balances of the Russian assets. So it's more or less easily to access, even though there are many risks associated with this proposal, which is unprecedented, but it's the Plan A. And Antonio Costa knows that there's a large majority in favor of this proposal and wants to have it done during this summit to send a very strong signal to both Ukraine, Russia, and also the United States that we're in for the long run.
So you said there's many countries in favour, but there's a couple of countries against. Tell us who they are and why they're so against.
Well, I think it's self-evident. The main country against is Belgium, which is the prime custodian of these assets. Belgium fears that basically be on the front line of Russia's retaliation and will have to pay, billions and billions of euros in damages and compensation for Russia because these are sovereign assets. So this is unprecedented, to be touching these assets, even though at the end of the process, Moscow could still recover the money, which seems unlikely. But anyway, Belgium is highly preoccupied with the associated risks with this proposal. And then on top of that, we have Hungary, which is opposed to any assistance to Ukraine. We have Slovakia, which is opposed to military assistance, not to budgetary assistance. And then last week, we saw that Malta, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, and Italy also voiced concerns about the reparations loan. This was an unexpected twist in the saga. So now we see that there are more countries than we initially thought with doubts about the reparations loan.
And Belgium's sources are close to Theo Franken, the defence minister, told me that the country could go bankrupt. That's why they literally do not want to budge on this. But Jorge, then, what is the plan B on the table?
Well, the plan B, it's on the table, but it's like in a hidden, they don't want to see
it's in the drawer somewhere.
Exactly.
Packed away in the drawer.
Because the plan B is joint debt, as we did during, for instance, the recovery, the COVID fund. But the issue with joint debt is that it's a very straightforward solution, right? Because you go to the markets and you raise the money. The European Commission will do that on behalf of member states. The issue here is that joint debt for a non-EU country requires unanimity because you need to change the rules of the EU budget. This is extremely important to keep in mind. And if you have one single country, in this case Hungary, saying no to any option, any form of assistance to Ukraine, then how you do join that? How do you do this plan B? This is the question now. So many people are saying that Hungary's opposition to joint debt could actually be the key to unlock the reparations loan, because plan B won't work. So do you see the situation right now?
I certainly do. This is like a massive puzzle right now in your head, and any reporter in Brussels covering this story. Just remind our listeners, Jorge, why the urgency to get this done before Christmas?
Very, very important question, Maeve. Ukraine needs a fresh injection of foreign assistance as early as April. Okay, let's underline this. So the urgency is there. As I said, the United States has withdrawn from the equation. So now it's basically on Europe to fund Ukraine, to finance Ukraine, and to ensure that Ukraine remains a viable economy, and also that the armed forces are properly equipped against Russia. So the urgency is very much there. So that's why some people are even talking about a bridge solution in case the reparations loan is not fully agreed, that leaders need more time to go through the reparations loan. At least the European Commission could do a sort of interim solution for April, May, June, even July, to ensure that there's no interruption in assistance for Ukraine and that the country doesn't go into default overnight.
Okay. And of course, for the EU, then the urgency, Jorge, as well, is to show President Trump and, of course, the Russian President Putin that the Europeans should be at the table in the peace talks.
Yes.
This is their leverage, right?
Yes. Let's go back to November when we got the leak from the 28-point peace plan. You remember this infamous peace plan that shocked everybody in Brussels and in every European capital. Point 14 of this plan said that the Russian assets should be split in two investment vehicles, one led by the US to reconstruct Ukraine and another one for joint projects between the United States and Russia, which means that Russia would benefit commercially from these assets. This is a big no for European and for Western allies because they want to ensure that through the assets we have accountability for the war crimes that Russia has committed.
Okay. Jorge Liboreiro, Euronews EU politics expert, thank you so much for all those insights and for sharing your time with us. Do keep an eye on Euronews.com for Jorge's reporting. It will, of course, be a sleepless night for you and the rest of the EU News team over the next couple of days.
Maybe more than one night, because as things are going, maybe we stay...
Well,
we need to change our plans.
We'll stay tuned to Euronews for that, and of course Euronews.com for all your articles. And I'll be back with Brussels, My Love, a usual episode this Friday to discuss Brussels' very own record, and that is that the European capital here is over 550 days, I believe, without an elected government. How's that impacting the EU? We'll find out. So don't miss that conversation. Before I go, though, a big thanks to all those behind the scenes here at Euronews that helped put our podcast out. Our sound technician, Jorge Liboreiro, and our Euronews podcast producer, Alicia Carnivali. And if you're not already, you can listen to this series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on euronews.com or Euronews' YouTube channel. And if you like what you hear, leave us a review, please, and spread the word about Brussels, My Love, the podcast. See you next time.